So in our previous episodes, we gave a short introduction on the 4 goals of life, being wealth, pleasure, righteousness, and liberation. And in our previous episodes, we gave a breakdown on a possible meaning for wealth and considerations, and also a meaning and considerations for pleasure. So today's episode, we take a look at righteousness. Now, when we speak of righteousness, it's a very, well, let's say broad aspect of life. And so we can say it's a major aspect. But I don't want to say major because I don't want to give the impression that it takes, like, it's somehow above the rest. Because it's 4 goals of life. They're all equal. Righteousness, I think, has to do with our social connections or social interactions. But it's not exactly limited to how we approach the outside or relationships or the world, but also how we approach our life and our attitudes toward life. Now, like always, let's start off by defining what we mean when we say righteousness. Because, like most things, it can be so loosely defined that we don't really have a definition for what we are talking about. Because, well, basically, in the word, the structure of the word itself, righteousness is doing what's right. But doing what's right, or being good, is really dependent on the social culture, the society. And then if you are thinking about doing what's right based on what society finds right, then you're not talking about something that is eternal, sanatan dharmic. So a definition of righteousness should be one that is focused on being an eternal definition of what is right. So and this is the main line that should be defined when defining what righteousness is, because culturally speaking, we can define what's right. Politically speaking, we can define what's right. On a personal level, we can define what's right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, it's good. That could be anything from stealing, from lying, from cheating or murder or any of these things. We can, in a way, justify these things as being either right or wrong. Simple example is when we go to war, when human beings go to war, people are killed. People are killed in the name of victory, of what is considered good. But Sanatan Dharma principle teaches non-violence. So especially killing is off the table. So how do you have violence and killing while maintaining that Sanatan Dharma, the eternal principle, says no violence? So this is where I'm saying that righteousness needs to be defined in terms of what is eternal, because we cannot be preoccupied with what is really temporary. Because even in the times of let's say empires being built up, there were wars fought for territory, not only in places like India and Asia, but all across the world. And that's the next aspect of Sanatan Dharma as well, is that it must be universal. It must be applicable to all situations. So it must be applicable to all times, all places, all peoples, all things. Well, let's look for a definition of righteousness based on that criteria. Let's say, what is right in a situational frame of mind? That is right not based on my culture alone, but based on all cultures. Not based on my gender alone, but on both genders, and not based on age alone, but all ages. So if we are thinking situationally of what is right, regardless of things like the economic situations and the political situations and ways of thinking, then we are speaking on a more subtle level of what is right. Because then we start to go into, well, what is good and what is bad, what is, let's say, evil. And that's where it gets so complex, that the word righteousness takes on a life of its own, in that it goes beyond simply seeking pleasure in life. It goes beyond seeking wealth in life, because it seems that those things are quantifiable. But righteousness is not quantifiable. We cannot sit and say that righteousness is, let's say, has this particular structure, if it's really to be a Sanatana dharmic principle. And the reason I say that is because we can structure a dharmic, or a set of principles on what is right and what is wrong. And then we have the different cultures in the world. We have, within our own society, we have the different subcultures within our societies based on the identities we have, like political identities and status or caste identities and all these things. But when we look at what is the aim of life, then we are speaking beyond the caste system. We are speaking beyond our affiliations. We are speaking with no regard to the situation of which country we are in, or our wealth, financial status, all these things. So how do we come to what is right, or righteousness? I would say that shows respect for other life. And that's the guiding principle of righteousness. And that is where we develop the different dharmas, or the ways which we interact with each other. But righteousness, as one of the goals of life, I think, is when we respect life. And my life, I respect myself, this body, the experiences I am, or the journey I am embarking on, the years of existence. And the same way I respect myself, that exact respect extends to another living being. Because we are talking about life. We are not talking about the four aims of humans. We are talking about the four aims of life. So all plants have life. All animals have life. Even the planets themselves have life. They have an existence. They have, when they were manifested or created, and they will have a day when they are destroyed. So that is, technically speaking, a lifespan. So righteousness is approaching life with just and due respect. And that means also treating yourself with respect. So it's not about saying, okay, well, I'm going to treat this person or this group of people with respect, and that puts me in a position where I am disrespecting or not honoring my life. Righteousness is the honoring of life, all life. So based on this, we can see where it is, let's say, easier, or we can start developing ideas rather than trying to figure out what is right. And by what is right, I mean trying to come up with every scenario and trying to figure out what is right and what is wrong. Because sometimes, as in the example of war, sometimes murder is necessary and sometimes it's not. And sometimes cheating and lying and stealing and all these things are necessary if it's to protect life. So there's no clear-cut way in saying that these things are not right. So let's delve into this a little. In that, so we have identified that righteousness is making a decision respecting life, respecting the life of others and other things, and having respect for your own life. Now it's easy to get carried away and say, well, I'm going to lie and steal and murder because I'm protecting my life. I am taking care of my life. So then I am justified in doing what I am doing. So then, well, how is that benefiting the life of the person that you are lying to and stealing from and well, obviously the murdering part. And so to say that I am justified in stealing is not righteous, simply based on the fact that the act causes a grievance in the life of somebody else. So because it's so complex a topic to know what is right and how much respect to give to someone, this is why it's one of the goals of life to understand this. This is why early on, so then we can look at now, well, when do we learn to be righteous? When do we learn righteousness? Or when do we develop the sense of being righteous? It should be at a very, very early stage in life. So then, if we look at what is being taught, for example, to children or infants, are they being, let's say, guided towards being righteous? Are they guided towards cultivating righteous conduct or a righteous mentality? So this is where the educational process comes in, where we have to look at now what is to guide the person into being righteous and understanding life. So this is my simple thought process on righteousness as one of the goals of life. I think because of the complexity of the topic, it seems to be more, let's say, a more difficult part of life, deciding what's right and what's wrong. Yet, it's something that we do so easily, which is justify what we think is right and wrong. So, it's just, I'm not trying to point at any one thing as being right or wrong in the approach of righteousness. It's just that, well, probably we should redefine what we think as being righteous to ourselves in order to live and achieve the goal of righteousness in our life. And it should probably take place earlier, so that in every situation later on in life, when we encounter situations and circumstances, that we are able to assess a little quicker, a little more detailed, what is the best outcome for everybody involved. And sometimes the best outcome for everybody involved is not exactly what you would consider good. So it may not be the best in terms of everybody is happy, or everybody is satisfied, or everybody gets what they want. But the best possible outcome is one where everybody benefits equally and rightly from this scenario. And this is where we need to be trained in order to get that from life. So like I say, it's a very complex topic, and I'm in no way saying that I have the answer that needs to be applied. It's just a little shift in the understanding of the word righteousness as a goal of life. Not circumstantial righteousness, not cultural righteousness, but one of the goals of life is to be righteous or to live righteously. What does that mean from an eternal principle? Not a cultural one, not a it is of the times. Eternally speaking, what is this thing that we call righteousness? So I thank you for hearing my words and ideas on the idea of righteousness as one of the 4 goals of life. And I invite you to join me on my next episode where I cover liberation as the 4th goal of life. My name is Omkar, saying thank you for joining me today on Diksha, and I'll see you next time.